allowing me to be here and talk about our beloved Detroit River. My name is McKenzi Waliczek, and I'll stick around afterwards if anybody has any questions that they want to talk personally, but we'll also have some time for Q&A afterwards as well. We're just going to touch the screen, how about that? All right, so the Detroit River is part of our shared history and also our future. The river is a critical corridor for recreation, commerce, and biodiversity. It connects communities and provides beautiful spaces for everyone to enjoy. However, there's a challenge standing between us and a cleaner river. Hundreds of years of intense and diverse industrial activity. Is it working? It's okay. Hundreds of years of intense and diverse industrial activity left behind toxic sediments, degraded habitats, and hardened shorelines. Which is why it's our mission at Friends of the Detroit River to protect, defend, and enhance the river now and for future generations. As part of the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, the river was designated as an area of concern. Down arrow. Oh, I was going up. Thank you. An area of concern is a place where the environment was so badly polluted that it needs special attention to become healthier again. Around the Great Lakes, we have 43 areas of concern, 5 of which are binational. And in conjunction with local organizations, the Environmental Protection Agency works with others to restore the 25 remaining areas of concern in the U.S. Great Lakes basins. So you can see on the screen here, all the different symbols are the 43 areas of concern. Those that have a circle or a triangle are still having work done to become healthier again. And for the rest of the talk today, we're going to be focusing on the U.S. side of the Detroit River, which is in orange on this map. The yellow side is the Canadian half, and they have their own Canadian cleanup committee that works very similar to organizations like ours to clean up their side of the river. Oh, and I forgot to mention, the Detroit River Public Advisory Council was established in 1991 in conjunction with the Area of Concern program to facilitate public involvement in cleanup efforts due to legacy contaminants and other environmental issues. The Public Advisory Council provides advice to state and federal agencies on local issues of concern and helps outline the steps and procedures for enhancing the river. Members of the Public Advisory Council are broadly representative of stakeholders in our area of concern, and Friends of the Detroit River has assisted with the Public Advisory Council since its inception and currently serves as its fiduciary. All of our meetings are open to the public, and if you have an interest in attending, our next one is on Monday, November 10th at 2 p.m. So I think we can all agree that the river provides many beneficial uses. But what happens when changes to the chemical, physical, or biological integrity of the Great Lakes systems are sufficient enough to cause significant environmental damage? Those uses become impaired. And in the Detroit River, we have 11 beneficial use impairments or environmental problems. Over the past 20 years, a lot of work has been done to address these problems, especially those listed in green and orange. To remove the restrictions on drinking water, authorities had to demonstrate that treated water from the Detroit River met Michigan's drinking standards. Similarly, the tainting of fish and wildlife flavor, BUI, was removed by addressing sources of pollution in the river, which led to an enhancement of the quality of our fish and wildlife. To help address the loss of fish and wildlife habitats and the degradation of their populations, 14 priority habitat projects were identified. This map highlights the 14 priority habitat projects, which are in blue. 13 of which have been completed. Those are in blue. The 14th is in pink, up at the Detroit Upper Riverfront Parks. And currently we are seeking funds for project implementation at Lakewood East Park specifically. Although this last project should be enough to address the river's habitat environmental problems, we hope to continue to do more habitat enhancements as funding allows. It's really important to recognize that the Area of Concern program isn't leading us to a river that's going to be pristine and sufficient enough for no more work to need to be done. It just gets us to a level playing field with the other watersheds in our area that haven't seen so much pollution and degradation. So there's always still more to do, but this will get us at kind of a level playing field with the others in our area.
Where's it geography? Where's it?
Well, is it?
On the map, it's on the photo it's on the screen. Where is that? I mean, is that E-course? Is it Rouge? Is it Rosio? Where?
The Detroit Upper Riverfront Parks? Or was there?
What's on your priority habitat project?
Okay.
It's on the screen.
Yep.
Yeah,
So the whole river, so up here is Lake St. Clair, then we have the Detroit River and it letting out into Lake Erie.
okay.
All 14 of these projects were identified to help progress the loss of fish and wildlife populations and their habitats. So all of the projects in blue have been completed to date, and I'll give a couple examples of those after this. And then the one in pink is where we're currently seeking grant funds, federal funds, to do a habitat restoration project. And then we have a yellow slot for future projects, so if you have any ideas, please let us know.
So Kathy, did you see where Grosse Hill is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we got Grosse Hill right here, Hennepin Marsh at the top. We got Celeron Island, Sugar Island, and Stony Island around the base and the refuge. So a little bit more about Sugar Island. This was our most recently completed habitat restoration project. It was completed last August. Sugar Island is exposed to high wind and wave action resulting from its southern exposure to Lake Erie, which accounted for approximately 10% loss of the island's shoreline due to erosion in recent decades. This project restored upland, wetland, and submergent habitats within the southern eroded areas of the island. Almost 3,000 feet of coastal shoreline was restored, 21 acres of wetlands protected, and over 2 acres of upland habitat were enhanced with native plantings. This project not only provides fish and wildlife habitat benefits, but it also benefits our recreation to paddlers, boaters, and bird watchers. Celeron Island sits at the mouth of the Detroit River near Lake Erie, and it serves as one of the most important spawning areas for western Lake Erie. Significant positive recreational and economic impacts are a result of these projects by further strengthening the Great Lakes fishery, which is worth more than $7 billion annually. With high waters that ensued in the 70s, 90s, and again recently, much of the protective shoreline along the island's southeastern side washed away. And this erosion caused the loss of many complex wetlands and a reduction in the once abundant submergent aquatic beds. And today the island is actually 2 separate bodies due to all of the erosion it experienced. On the map, I'm just showing with an arrow, this is kind of the northeastern side of the island, and so that shoal, protective shoal, is kind of right here, and then a lot of the majority of the work was done on the southern end of the island. So to address the severe erosion problems, the construction of these offshore rock shoals were designed to reduce the energy of incoming waves from Lake Erie and wind-derived siege effect across the lake. allowing for the regeneration of this emergent vegetation. The shoals also provide habitat for pollinators, birds, turtles, amphibians, and fish, and are very important for our migratory waterfowl and shorebirds. And I want to call out something on this image. So you can see that outside of the shoals, where Lake Erie is, say, down here, you can see that there's nothing growing. You just see the bottom of the river. But inside the shoals, where we have this calm, protected area, you can see all of the submergent aquatic vegetation growing. None of this was planted. This was all naturally regenerated just by giving it the opportunity to do so. We created a calm space, and all of these plants from the native seedbed were able to grow because they had the right conditions. Without the shoals, there is no habitat out here. It's just sand and silt and whatever else is at the bottom of the river. And I also want to point out these kind of white speckles that you see. They're very faint because this photo was taken from an airplane. And this is actually when fish were spawning. So these are fish out there utilizing this calm area and the vegetation, and they're in there spawning. Stony Island is also part of the conservation crescent, which is surrounding the lower end of Gros Isle, and is also well recognized for its biodiversity. However, similar to the other two islands, decades of erosion greatly reduced the wetlands surrounding the island, and the existing breakwater structures that once protected the island's bays were eliminated. And so habitat improvements were designed to protect not only the northern end of the island, but also its southern end as well. The island provides a productive location for rare and transient waterfowl, along with nesting and feeding areas for many species of ducks and wading birds. The island is also home to the river's largest great blue heron rookery with over 100 active nests. And that's found in this kind of tall stand of trees right here. Really cool to see. You can see a lot of the blue herons out on the shoals enjoying the habitat and the fish that are now abundant here. We had a stopover from a snowy owl. This was done before the project was even completed. It made refuge as it was passing by, and also some eagles utilizing the shoals as well. So these shoals are constructed to help protect the islands from erosion, but they provide great habitat for not only the fish, but all these different animals as well. So now to talk about what we're doing. We talked about what's been done. So to help address the 5 environmental problems in blue, we established a sediment remediation collaborative earlier this year that will help advance the processes to address contaminated sediments. Toxic contaminants that have settled to the bottom of the Detroit River are related to the degradation of benthos, which are the plants, animals, and other organisms that live near or on the bottom of the river, like microbes, worms, and crustaceans, which are vital to the nutrient cycling of our Great Lakes systems, and also a very critical part of our food chain. Contaminated sediments are also related to restrictions on fish and wildlife consumptions, which is really critical when we think about many of our communities relying on the river for sustenance fishing to supplement their diets. It's also related to fish tumors and other bird and animal deformities and birth reproductive problems, and restrictions on dredging activities. So the process of cleaning up contaminated sediments begins with sampling. After that, characterizations and remedial designs help determine the extent of contamination and the type of cleanup that's needed. Then feasibility studies determine the viable options for cleanup, which is often a physical removal or dredging of these contaminants, or a covering up or capping of them. Then remedial designs develop detailed engineering plans for that remediation. And finally, remedial action or construction is the physical work to remove or contain or cover up those contaminants. And after all that work is done, post-monitoring ensures that the remediation is functioning as intended. So sediment sampling in the Detroit River began in the 80s, and the most recent effort was completed in 2022. Over 1,000 samples were analyzed for PCBs, PAHs, TPHs, and other contaminants. The state of Michigan has completed characterizations for the entire Detroit River and is currently leading efforts on remedial investigations along the McLouth-Groseal shoreline, Elizabeth Park Canal, and the Gibraltar Canals. So what you see in here on the map in red, orange, and yellow are the probable effect concentrations, or the level above which that we know causes harm when these contaminants are there. So if you look at the yellow areas, that means there is enough contamination that we know it's causing harm to the benthos, to our fish, to our animals, to us as humans. What's in orange is 2 times that level that's known to cause harm, and red is 3 times the level that's known to cause harm. But it's important to note that many of our contaminants are more than 3 times the level known to cause harm. We're just only showing red as that, so it's 3 times anything more. And for example here, we have the Groseal Toll Bridge at the very top of this map, and then we're going down, and on the next slide I will have the next stretch. That is of most interest, I'm assuming, to the folks in this room. And to give some examples, PAH is 57 times more than the level known to cause harm here. So we have high levels of contamination we're talking about. This is that same map continued. So we kept going downstream, and here we have the public bridge, and you can see the level of contaminants in this area as well. So the Detroit River has multiple contaminants in very high concentrations due to the number and the intensity of a couple hundred years of industrial uses. Of most concern are the levels of PAH, PCB, and mercury. PAH is an environmental contaminant formed from the incomplete burning of organic materials like oil, coal, and wood. It's a known carcinogen, increasing the risk of cancer and liver and kidney disease. PAH accumulates in our food chain, causing health issues in fish like mutations and birth defects. And in certain areas of the river, kind of more up by Belle Isle, this toxic substance is found 8,000 times more concentration than is known to cause harm. So we're talking really toxic stuff here. PCB is a persistent contaminant, which means it does not degrade and remains in the environment for a long time. It's used in a variety of products like electrical capacitors, transformers, and hydraulic oils. It's also a known carcinogen, and it accumulates in the food chain, increasing risk of cardiovascular disease, liver disease, and diabetes. And mercury is a heavy metal from industrial sources like burning coal and is released from products like batteries and fluorescent light bulbs. People are exposed to mercury by eating contaminated fish, posing health risks to the human nervous system and fetal development. Mercury also accumulates in fish tissue, stunting growth and causing reproductive problems and liver and kidney damage. Wildlife affected by mercury poisoning suffer from neurological, psychological, and physical issues. On the screen, we just have some images of tumors and livers. tumors on catfish. This one's right from the Detroit River. And if you are an angler or know an angler, I would highly recommend them to check out the Eat Safe Fish guidelines. This is all online, and they have very pinpointed information based on what waterway you're fishing and eating fish from, and how to prepare and eat them safely. So the targeted areas for sediment cleanups are shown in blue on this map. Over the past few decades, a handful or so of remediation projects have already been completed, and those are identified by the circled white numbers. So we can see along the Detroit River, if we start here at Lake St. Clair, we have targeted hotspots more or less along the entire reach of the river. And we've had a couple of remediations done, and I will chat more about those in some future slides. So what we're talking about when we see all those target areas is about 3.6 million cubic yards of contaminated sediments that need to be remediated, which is estimated to cost about $1 billion total. Taking a deeper dive into the areas here by Groseal, the Upper Trenton Channel Reach, so we're talking here, is about a $100 million project. Right now, remedial designs are already completed, and construction is planned for 2027 or 2028. So if you're living on the west side of Groseal, in a couple of years you might start to see some equipment in these areas for remediation. In this stretch, there was a remediation already completed in 2006, right here next to that number 4. That removed about 30,000 cubic yards of contaminated sediments. So there's still a lot more to remediate, but some work has already been done here.
That was the Black Lagoon?
No, that was the BASF Riverview Federal Marine Terminal. The first McGuagan Creek cleanup removed about 25,000 cubic yards of contaminated sediments that were heavy in PAH, PCBs, lead, and zinc in 1997, and this cost about $3 million at that time. However, some materials, some of the contaminated sediments had to be left in place due to buried utilities. And in 1998, the state conducted additional studies and found that some of the areas still had elevated concentrations of these industrial and urban chemicals, metals, and PAHs. To further evaluate the cleanup options, follow-up sediment investigations were completed. The investigations identified 2 more areas of interest that required cleanup. One is at the mouth of McGuagan Creek, and the other is on the western part of the Upper Trenton Channel. So when we look at here is about the McGuagan Creek mouth, roughly, and on the western side of the Upper Trenton Channel. If you want more information about this specific project, you can go to detroitriver.org/PAC for Public Advisory Council, or as I mentioned, attend one of our meetings. The next one's on Monday. It's virtual, and I can send you the link. The McLouth shoreline is about a $250 million project. Right now, feasibility studies and remedial designs are ongoing. This is an EPA Superfund site, so it's handled a little differently than some of the other sites where the federal government is taking the lead on these actions. An example of remediation that was done in this stretch of shoreline is the Black Lagoon. So that is the photograph on the bottom of the slide right here. You can see when they're dredging, they put up these curtains so the contaminants don't flow into other areas. But you can just see by the color difference that it's not very healthy. And for reference, that Black Lagoon remediation was done right here. it removed about 115,000 cubic yards of contaminants, mostly PCBs, mercury, lead, zinc, oil, and grease. Yeah?
Where do all these contaminants go?
The question was, where do all these contaminants go? And that's a great question. Historically, they've been going to confined disposal facilities like the one at Point Boulay, but that facility is quickly filling up. And so a big part of these efforts is to be identifying where these materials are gonna go. And right now, we don't have an answer for it. But feasibility studies are being done to see, I believe Army Corps is leading them to see where we might have some more options to dispose of these contaminants. And finally, Elizabeth Park is about a $35 million project. Remedial investigations are ongoing right now by the state. This covers about 1.5 miles of the canals, and this investigation will further define the contaminated areas along the shoreline and what the future remediation might look like. The portion of the Elizabeth Park Canal's target area between George Street and the canal is planned to be addressed as a separate remediation led by EPA Superfund. And the Gibraltar canals, right now the state is leading remedial investigations for the approximately 2 miles of the shoreline within the canal system. The investigation will define where the remediation needs to take place and what that remediation might look like, dredging or capping. Current estimates show that there's about 50,000 cubic yards of contaminants in the Gibraltar canals, which will cost about $18 million total. So one of the key programs for cleaning up these contaminated sediments is the Great Lakes Legacy Act, which is a cost-sharing program with the Environmental Protection Agency, and it's a voluntary program that incentivizes cleanups by providing 65% of those costs. So right now, we're trying to work with industries, stakeholders, municipalities, whoever has an interest, to come and help meet that 35% of the cost that isn't provided by the federal government. So what's standing between us and a cleaner river? As we mentioned, characterizations are already done, and there's a few remedial investigations left to complete, which the state is working on right now and should be completed sometime next year. So that would mean we are almost done with this phase right here. As I mentioned, we're looking for folks to enter into a Great Lakes Legacy Act agreement with us so we can help meet that 35% cost share as a requirement. And then we need it's estimated we need about $30 million to get through feasibility studies and remedial design for the river, which would bring us to the point of construction. We know this is a huge effort, and we know we need help to get momentum, which is why I'm out here doing presentations like this. There are many opportunities to get involved, and we expect it to look a little different for everybody based on their own interests, needs, and missions. And it might look like participating in meetings when available or receiving updates from the collaborative, lending your name to help build connections and encourage other stakeholders to join the collaborative, or contributing to the cash match requirement, or helping identify others who can help meet that match. Non-monetary or in-kind match can also be used, so not just cash. And those in-kind measures could look like services, labor, equipment, storage, river access, or another restoration project. We can be really creative with the non-monetary match. And so if you have an upcoming project in the river or along its shoreline or know of one, we'd love to hear about it to see if it could help contribute to bringing some more dollars here for sediment cleanup. So habitat restoration and sediment remediation in the Detroit River are powerful investments in Michigan's economy and health. Research shows that for every dollar invested in the Great Lakes, there's a $3.35 return on investment. As a critical corridor for recreation, commerce, and biodiversity, the Detroit River stands to realize major economic and community benefits, including stronger tourism, fishing industries, and revitalized waterfront properties, improved public health, once these legacy contaminants are removed. With the Great Lakes holding about 20% of the entire world's fresh water, and the Detroit River providing about 40% of the state of Michigan's drinking water, it's critical that we invest in sediment remediation for cleaner waters now and for our future generations. And with that, I want to thank you all for being a friend of the Detroit River and listening to me this morning, or afternoon if it's got there yet. I'm available to take any questions and answers here. I also have some handouts over by this window that if anybody wants to grab any, there's also an email sign-up sheet if you want to stay involved. Thank you. Yeah, I saw a hand up back there.
Yes, thank you. So you mentioned that there's a lot of toxic contamination in the Belle Isle area. So what's to prevent that from coming down and recontaminating the areas that have been cleaned up in our area?
Yeah, you were quick. I was going to come bring you the mic. So the question was, we know there's really high levels of contamination up by Belle Isle and other areas of the upper reaches of the river. What's to prevent those contaminants from flowing downstream? These contaminants are pretty heavy when we think of things in a chemical stance, so they tend to sink to the bottom of the river and stay there. When the state is doing their sampling, they run their equipment until it cannot go any further, so to the point of the equipment failing. So they go drill down as far as they can. And what they found is that most of these contaminants are about 5 to 10 meters down, buried under the sediment already. So unless there is, an activity that is stirring that up, they're not naturally going to resurface. That's why there's restrictions on dredging in the Detroit River area of concern, because we know that the contaminants are buried down there, and so therefore we don't allow dredging in those areas without a remediation in coordination with it. The navigational dredgings that are done by Army Corps each year are not in these contaminated areas, so that is how that dredging is done. Yeah?
So you talked about the sediment contamination, but what about water contamination?
So we talked about sediment contamination, but what about water contamination? So our water quality in the Detroit River, it's different to compare the two. They're not really, it's kind of like apples and oranges. You're talking about two different playing fields here. Our water quality is more tied to like stormwater runoff, urban runoff, rather than these contaminants that are buried at the bottom of the river. And so when we talk about water quality, we need to look at things like confined sewer overflows and having, more green spaces in rain gardens to help capture and infiltrate and slow down water that might be contaminated before it has a chance to enter into our river. Is that always done? Not so much, but with efforts from groups like Grossville Nature and Land Conservancy and others, we can continue to enhance our water quality, but to talk about them in comparison with the sediments, it's not quite a level playing field. But I don't have too many specifics on our dissolved oxygen and all of the different water quality standards for the Detroit River off the top of my head, but I'm happy to share that if anybody is interested. Yeah.
So is the contamination downriver less deep than at Belle Isle? I mean, it seems like if it's very deep enough, it's not prone to re-contaminating the water stream in bad storm events, but is it closer to the surface in this area?
I'm actually not sure what the differences are between the upper reaches of the river and downriver. I could definitely reach out to the state and see if they're willing to share some of that data. I just kind of get the whole overarching, here's what we found in general. As we continue down that project pipeline of feasibility, remedial design, and that timeline, we will know more about that. Because the state is still working on a lot of that work, and the downriver reaches, the mid to lower Trenton Channel, Elizabeth Park canals, and Gibraltar canals, we're still waiting to find that out.
Okay, so you don't actually have I'm not sure what, looking at the cores, how far down contamination is buried.
I do not. It might be something that the state and EPA have that I just am not aware of. But I know as we continue through this remedial investigation, that information will surface. So hopefully in the next year, we should have a little bit more on that.
Okay, yeah, just kind of a follow-up to the question about the not remediating Belle Isle first, because that contamination is so deep and you might be doing more harm by dredging it up, even with containment to the best of engineering capabilities. Yeah, why is that different from doing remediation in this area? That's the main question.
Yeah, so right now we actually don't know which of those target areas are going to be remediated first. That's something we'll figure out as we go down this project. Each of those areas will receive their own remedial design, which until we get to that point of a project, we really don't know what the end result will be. Are we going to cap it? Are we going to dredge it? That's when the really detailed engineering plans that go way above my head come together, and that we can actually see, well, what is the best course of action for this specific area? And it is likely what happens in the upper reaches of the river versus down here are going to look different. Yeah.
How many entities are involved in checking it all out?
Yeah, the question is how many entities are involved in checking out contaminated sediments. So the Environmental Protection Agency and the State of Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy are the lead federal and state agencies. Friends of the Detroit River is the local lead, and then we are really trying to bring together as many different organizations, industries, and stakeholders that want to be involved to work under that Great Lakes Legacy Act agreement. We just started this collaborative earlier this year. I want to say we've engaged with about 85 different partners so far. We have not entered an official Great Lakes Legacy Act agreement yet to date. So we're not in that point of accruing any match to go towards these projects. We're still trying to identify groups for that. And it's really important that, you know, just like many other things, we're not the only ones doing this work. In fact, there's many different avenues to get sediment remediation done. As I mentioned, there's some Superfund sites, which is more of an enforcement action where the state and or federal government comes to an industry and says, you have to clean this up. What we're trying to do is be the local organization that incentivizes groups to voluntarily be a part of this program, and then they only have to pay 35% of the cleanup cost. Whereas if you go another enforcement route, they're required to pay 100% of the cost. So we know there's been many industries on the river that have been polluters. They know that they have been legacy polluters. And under Sarbanes-Oxley Act, which is more legal garb, essentially all these industries know that they have liability and they have to keep that money on their books. What we're trying to do is say, come work with us right now voluntarily and only pay a portion of that. Or you can wait until however many years down the road, and then they might be forced to pay the full price. So we're kind of playing like the carrot and the stick game, where I have the carrot over here and some of the other agencies have the stick that they're shaking. So say, go work with them, be a voluntary part of this program, and help clean this up. Just be a good corporate partner and kind of own up to what was done.
And state funds can count as matching funds, right?
Correct. State funds can count as matching funds, anything that's not federal. So I think there's talk of the state entering into a Great Lakes Legacy Act agreement, and we're very hopeful that that works out. And so we can start to acquire some of that non-federal match through the efforts that the state is doing and has been doing for decades. And we can bring in other partners to work under that agreement. Not everybody has to have their own agreement. We can have others work under an existing agreement so long as it's the work is done within the timeline of that agreement. Yeah.
What's the relationship between the Great Lakes Legacy Act and the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative?
Yeah, so the question is, what's the relationship between the Great Lakes Legacy Act and the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative? So the Great Lakes Legacy Act was signed into law in 2002. It was successful enough that it was reauthorized again in 2008. And in 2010, the Great Lakes Legacy Act got folded under the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, which is where it lives till this day. And so each year there's about $50 million appropriated through GLRI, the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, for Legacy Act projects. So I think that's an important point to make, that we're talking about a $1 billion project with a funding source that's only appropriating $50 million a year for all of the 25 areas of concern in the Great Lakes basins that still need this work done. So even if we were to get all that money for the next 17 years, you know, in just to Detroit River, not any of the other AOCs, that would be the amount of support that would be needed to make this project complete. So, not a heavy lift at all.
What do we know about the remediation or future plans at the DTE site, the Trenton River, Trenton Channel?
The question is, what do we know about the remediation or future efforts at the DTE site? I personally don't know too much. I know that the new battery one, is that what we're talking about? Yeah. I don't know too much about that. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, I can't answer that.
But the canal around Elizabeth Park was marked as one of the areas
Yes.
for settlement, so that's being studied and figured out, right?
Correct. So remedial investigations, essentially kind of the second step, are ongoing right now for the Elizabeth Park canals, and that should be completed sometime next year. So we might know more about the sediment remediation in that area, but I don't believe that touches the DTE site. I think it's just adjacent. Let me see. Let's pull up our map. So
DTE is the
it's
bottom
probably
part.
like right here, I would
It's
guess.
the bottom part of that island.
Is it?
There, right there.
Oh. So the canal goes around it.
Yeah.
Then there might, you know, over the next year as we start to learn more from the state's remedial investigations, there might be some opportunities for collaboration with the work that's going on at the DTE site. As far as I know, it's just they're in process of putting in the battery plant.
Yeah, just a comment, these numbers seem these numbers seem huge for some of us, but for others, considering the number of billionaires and now future trillionaires in this country, it's almost like penny change, you know?
Who's got connections out here? We need to talk to those folks. No, exactly. It seems like a lot, but when we break it down into the different target areas, it can be a more manageable number. As I mentioned, 30 million will get us to the point of construction for the entire river. And then those construction dollars are typically the most expensive part of the project. And so we're really just focusing on how can we advance the next step and get us closer and closer to that. This is gonna be a very long process. I'm in it for the long haul, so who knows, maybe in a few more years I could be sharing some updates on the progress and showing like where we've been since then. But yeah, this all just started. Our involvement just started earlier this year in the spring, so we don't even have a full year under our belt. Really, we're just in this building momentum phase, trying to make connections, and identify folks that want to be a part of this legacy restoration of the river. You know, this is something that is once in a lifetime, and we want to see those benefits for everybody.
So I've seen the public able to do some good things by getting together and you know, like Humbug Marsh or whatever else. So I think that those of us who don't have $1 billion, we can probably continue to speak with our elected officials to make sure that this remains a priority for them.
Definitely, yeah. Just being involved in the collaborative, sharing this information that you heard today, taking some handouts and sharing it with other folks. There's a way for everybody to be involved in this. It doesn't have to be just who's got a check. There's really just raising awareness around this effort. It's funny how many times I've done this presentation and folks are like, I had no idea. It's at the bottom of the river. You know, you don't really see it with your eye in the day-to-day. You see it in these long-term trends and effects with our health and the population of our fish and wildlife, and also of humans. So it's not something tangible that you can just say, here it is right here, but when you look at the impacts it has, it really is outstanding and something that I think is pretty important, and I hope that I can convey that message clearly to others like you all and the other groups that I have lined up to do more presentations with. Yeah.
Just to add, I think, I mean, he mentioned those projects are going to take a long time, and they are in the, I mean, some of them just started. So when I say it's going to take some time, we're talking sometimes 10 years for each project to reach the cleanup phase. But before that phase, you know, there's a lot of chances for everyone to get involved if they want to get involved. I mean, look at McLeod Steel, for example. Oh, I'm sorry. Look at McLeod Steel right now. There is actually a public, a group involved in everything taking place, and so your voice can be heard by if you want to join that group and making sure that you know any plan is is a sound plan before they actually the cleanup take place. And I bet you every project she mentioned, they will have a different group just for that, cleanup. And like I said, they want to hear from you before, there's many, I know myself, many cleanup change route because of the input from the public. But if you don't have any public input, they'll probably do what they think is the right thing to do and do it. So, but like I said, this is taking a long time. If you want to get involved and be involved, you'll have a chance to do it and your voice will be heard.
Thank you. And yeah, I think that's a great, right now, the McLeod site does have a group like that, as Jason mentioned. If you go to, the McGuagan Creek, I apologize. If you go to this website down here, there's actually a survey you can take right now to provide your feedback. And our public advisory council meetings, they're once every 2 months virtually. That's another opportunity for you to hear directly from EPA and Eagle, and also to share your comments and feedback. We want the public to be involved. We need community buy-in for these projects. And so if there is interest, please don't hesitate to reach out. Sign up for an email on our email sheet over here, or just let me know, and I'm happy to do my best. This is a very new thing for Friends of the Detroit River. We know the state and the EPA has been involved for decades doing this work, the sampling and characterizations, and we're just trying now to bring in more players to get that non-federal match requirement so we can start to actually see these cleanups take place. So I'm talking from a really high level, and then as we continue to learn more, we'll be able to dive deeper into these specific areas and be able to answer questions like, well, specifically here, where is the contaminants? How much is there? How deep is it? But right now, we're just in that momentum building phase and just trying to bring more partners and raise awareness. Yeah.
Sorry, I've got one more question.
So maybe we can make this the last question?
Okay, sounds good to me.
You win.
Kind of a little bit maybe more future thinking. A lot of the contaminants that have been looked at are more of the legacy ones that we have decades of information on the toxicity of them. What about PFAS? Have we incorporated that into testing and know what that distribution is?
That's a great question. So we're talking about legacy contaminants that have been here for many years. What are we doing to address more recent contaminants like PFAS? The Area of Concern program does not address PFAS. It is a newer contaminant that wasn't around when this program was developed. It's not to say it's not important. It's just a different funding source, a different program, a different avenue. So it's still something that needs to be addressed, and actions will be taken for that. It's just not through the Area of Concern program or the Great Lakes Legacy Act. It would be another funding source.
But they are, like the McLeod Steel, the one in this area, they are a Superfund site. So PFAS contamination and sampling should take place.
Yes, and I don't do anything with Superfund other than say, this is a Superfund site. So thank you, Jason. I'm going to have to start having you come to all my presentations, fill in on that Superfund piece that I still am learning on.
It's been 12 years.
Well, thank you. I'm going to hand the mic back over to Paul.